Okay, everybody, we're going to be doing unit 16 in this lesson. This whole unit should be one video. This is the urinary system. This is going to be the most abbreviated unit of the entire year. The urinary system is very simple, especially at the high school level. If you go to college, I can assure you, you'll get a lot more information. You'll learn about nephrology, filtration, how the nephrons work, and how a lot of things are filtered out from what you place in your body. So let's get started. Nearly 200 liters of fluid is filtered by our kidneys every day. Anything that you eat, anything that you inhale, anything that you drink, all goes into your bloodstream. It doesn't just have to be those three. It could be things you inject that can also end up in your bloodstream. Your bloodstream goes everywhere. And eventually, it can reach your kidneys. And your kidney's job is to filter out all that stuff. All the stuff that you have circulating throughout your body that really shouldn't be in your body is going to be cleaned out by your kidneys, and it's going to be formed into urine, which is waste product, liquid waste product. In Major League Baseball, football, other professional sports leagues, players have to submit to random drug tests to make sure they're not cheating, because whatever they place in their body will eventually have to leave their body, and you can detect it in the urine. Some people have to get drug tested for regular jobs. People that are on probation for perhaps drug use, they have to have regular drug tests. All of this is typically done through urine. I remember being in high school like you all are now and having to do a physical for high school football. And one of the things we had to do is we had to pee in a cup, and we had to prove that we were not doing any drugs or any sort of supplements that might enhance our performance. I don't know if they still do drug tests in high school. They may or they may not. I'm not aware of that. But your kidneys really do filter out a lot of stuff. So what are some of the substances that are filtered? We got toxins, alcohol, drugs, other waste products. We have metabolic wastes, things that your body just produces as a byproduct that it needs to get rid of through the process of metabolism. Metabolism is taking all the energy in the food that you eat and converting it into energy, and there's always waste and byproducts with that. Then we have excess ions, sodium, chloride, other things like that. Electrolytes, they get peed out. So here's the main idea. The urinary system. And by the way, the urinary system is also called the excretory system. It is like a water purification plant that keeps a city's, the city is your body, water drinkable and disposes of waste. So here's how it kind of goes. I think dirty is a strong word. So let's say we have unclean blood. It goes into the urinary system. And ideally, when the urinary system is done with it, we have clean blood. It's been cleaned up of all the crap that's really built up in your bloodstream through basic metabolism, through the things that you place in your body, good or not good, drugs, alcohol, medicines that can all be detected. And so what is the urinary system made of? Well, we've done plenty of systems before. The digestive system is your mouth, esophagus, or pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, anus, liver, gallbladder, pancreas. There's actually maybe less than half of that when it comes to the urinary system. The urinary system is composed of kidneys, to which we have two. You can live without one, but your lifespan can be reduced. And so people will have kidney transplants if they have a faulty kidney or kidney failure, and they can be replaced. But here's the thing, when you donate your kidney, your lifespan will likely be reduced, but you can help increase the lifespan of someone who may be missing a kidney that desperately needs one. You have ureters, and I don't know what it is about ureters, but students, ever since I taught this class, cannot remember what a ureter is. And so I'm going to definitely place some extra emphasis on that. It's really easy. You have one urinary bladder, not the same as your gallbladder. So typically we just call it the bladder, but because there's two structures in your body that have the word bladder in it, we'll say urinary bladder to be sure that I'm clear. And then you have the urethra. Obviously, female's urethra is different than the male urethra. Females have a much shorter urethra and males have a longer urethra because it goes through the penis. And as far as blood supply is concerned, you have renal arteries. Renal arteries branch off from the descending aorta and it delivers oxygenated blood to the kidneys. And this blood is quote unquote dirty or unclean. Let's say unfiltered. I think unfiltered is a much better word. So that's what I'm going to put here. Unfiltered. That's a much better word than even unclean. And then I'll put filtered blood. And then you have renal veins. Renal veins returns blood from the kidneys back to the inferior vena cava. But the thing is, this blood is typically going to be deoxygenated. So this is going to go back to the heart, and it's still going to be filtered, but it's going to go back to the heart to get oxygenated and then cycle through the body again. Okay, let's continue. Oh, before we actually continue, how about I go over here and give you some visuals, okay? So this is essentially your urinary system. You have a kidney here, into which you have two. This is also a kidney. This is a ureter. A ureter is a tube of smooth muscle that allows urine formed in the kidneys to flow down to the urinary bladder. And I cannot begin to explain why so many students just can't remember this. So perhaps you want to pay a little extra emphasis to this. Give yourself a little more brain power. This is your urinary bladder. Oh, my computer is acting a little weird here. I don't know what's going on. This is the urinary bladder. This holds your urine. And then this is the urethra. I suppose the common name for this that you may have heard before is your pee hole, okay? In females, it is shorter. In males, it is longer. And we'll come back to this anatomy here. So those are the four main structures. Kidneys, this is the gross anatomy, by the way. Kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, urethra. Now, these red blood vessels are going to be renal arteries. In case you haven't already picked up on that, the word renal refers to kidney. Renal failure means kidney failure. And then the blue ones are going to be renal veins. They return deoxygenated blood back to the heart. Know that anatomy: kidney, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra, renal arteries, renal vein. Okay? Let's continue. The kidneys have a multitude of roles for your body. Each kidney regulates the total volume of water in the body, as well as the concentration of solutes. And remember that a solute is things like salt. A solute is something like ions or excessive protein, excessive sugar in your blood. Solutes are dissolved substances. Okay, I mentioned ions earlier. Your kidneys help to regulate the concentration of ions. These ions are going to be potassium and sodium, for the most part. Other functions of your kidneys, they ensure long-term pH balance. If you remember from your chemistry days, pH means, acidic and basic, or the proper term is actually alkaline. You want to make sure that you have the proper pH as part of your metabolism. The kidneys help to excrete wastes and foreign substances, drugs, toxins, alcohol. The kidneys help to produce erythropoietin. It's a little bad handwriting there because it's a tough word. Erythropoietin and renin. Both are important molecules for regulating red blood cell, RBC, production and blood pressure. Let's continue. More function of the kidney. You can see why they're very important. They are very important organs. Kidneys help to convert vitamin D to its active form. As well as many other functions that I'm not going to get into all of it, but those are just several. If you decide to take college anatomy, you'll definitely get more into it, okay? All right, let's take catch your breath here. And I'm gonna now go into the internal anatomy and then the microscopic anatomy. So this is gonna be internal gross anatomy. Let me come on over here. All right, here's what I want you guys to follow. Check this out. Blood that is unfiltered, follow this arrow, it's going to go into arteries. And what it does is it enters these kidneys into the tops of these renal pyramids. You really kind of have to use your imagination, but these pyramids, as you see what I'm drawing here, is where a lot of filtration happens. It's in here where you actually have the kidneys function, which is known as nephrology. Any doctor that really works with kidneys or patients that have urinary issues is typically a nephrologist, perhaps a urologist as well. Urology is the study of the urinary system, and then nephrology is the kidney function. So there is a difference between urology and nephrology. But where I'm going to highlight here is where a lot of the microscopic nephrology, which is the filtration, happens. If you ever heard of patients that go on dialysis, that's where this naturally happens. So let's just talk about the microscopic gross anatomy, okay? So I'm going to use a highlighter to really try to break this apart. This area that I'm highlighting yellow, this is known as the renal cortex. A cortex is typically the outer lining. The inside this is known as the renal medulla. Okay. Next, these areas that look like upside down triangles, you kind of have to use your imagination, are called renal pyramids. These are composed of parallel bundles of microscopic tubes in which urine collects. So I will break all this down, okay? But these are renal pyramids. And as I already mentioned, the red blood vessels here are renal arteries. They are delivering oxygen to the kidneys, but it's not only the fact that it is oxygenated, but it's also unfiltered. And then these blood vessels that are blue are renal veins, in which this blood is already been filtered, but it is deoxygenated. So let's briefly go over the function of the renal cortex, the renal medulla, and the renal pyramids. The renal cortex is the most superficial region, which is the outermost region. You know, if somebody was in a car accident and they just have a bunch of scrapes or scratches, they have superficial injuries, things that'll heal quickly, nothing really serious. It's on the surface. That's what superficial means. As far as the renal medulla is concerned, that's going to be deeper. This is more interior, and it is past the cortex, further inside. And then lastly, or second lastly, I left one out, we'll get to that. We have renal pyramids. These renal pyramids are composed of parallel bundles of microscopic urine collecting tubules. Tubules means really small microscopic tubes. Give me a moment to catch up. Okay, if you look back here, I'm going to erase all this highlighting and all these marks, so I have a clean diagram for us. Okay. Filtration happens here. This is where blood becomes filtered. Blood is carrying wastes, toxins, excessive ions, and so on. And this is where it happens. All the waste is going to collect in these renal pyramids, and then it's going to be filtered into urine. And that's what we excrete. And the urine goes into the ureters, which lead the kidneys down to the urinary bladder. This structure here, I'm going to highlight in blue. This is the urine. This is a ureter. all the waste that is made by the nephrons goes into the pyramids, and it all empties into the ureter, and the ureter goes down to the bladder, and that's where the urine is transported. So I want to make that very clear to you guys. Urine is made in these places, and then it goes down the pyramid. It collects here, and then it goes down into your bladder through the ureters. Hope that's clear. Now, the one thing I did leave out, this is my fault, are the renal columns. This is actually very simple. There's a renal column here. Here, notice that they just, all they are is that they separate one pyramid from the next. That's all. So I'll just go ahead and throw that in there. Renal columns separate renal pyramids. Okay. All right. So that is the gross internal anatomy. Gross means you can view it without a microscope. Now I want to get into the microscopic anatomy. And this is, I am having flashbacks to college. This is a nephron. Now at the high school level, you really don't need to know this all that much. So I'm just going to kind of give you the overview of it. And then again, if you want to be a nurse or a doctor or a vet, you'll take anatomy or in college or med school, and you can learn all about this. But here's the basics. That's what I feel high school is about. You really learn the basics. This red blood vessel is an artery. It is carrying oxygenated blood, but the blood is also unfiltered. This blood will enter into a structure known as the glomerulus. Within the glomerulus, you actually have the magic of filtration. This is where it happens, in the glomerulus, right there. That's where filtration happens. When patients have to go on dialysis, they're not able to do this process, and a machine has to filter their blood for them, and it takes hours a day. It can really just kill a day. Now, after the glomerulus has actually filtered the blood, the filtered blood is still oxygenated. And if you follow it, it will eventually transition from oxygenated to deoxygenated, go into the renal vein, and leave the kidney and go back into the circulatory system. But now, what about all that junk, all that waste that was taken from your blood that needed to be filtered? We're talking ions, metabolic wastes, toxins, drugs. That's going to be filtered, or excuse me, it's already been filtered, but it's going to be combined with other fluids to form urine. And eventually, if you follow this tubule system, it eventually makes its way to the collecting duct. And the collecting duct empties into the renal pyramids. The renal pyramids all empty into the ureters, and the ureters enter into the urinary bladder. This is how urine is formed. Really let that sink in. That's really important. Okay. Other than that, let's see if there's anything I might be missing. Yeah, there's a couple things here. We have tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. For tubular reabsorption, this process removes amino acids, glucose, ions, water, etc., and returns them to the bloodstream. This all happens within the kidney. So this is like stuff that you need, okay? This is stuff you want to keep. You got tubular secretion. Sorry for the bad handwriting. My computer's acting a little weird. There we go. Tubular secretion is all about secrete excessive or excess substances from blood into filtrate, like ions, drugs, or substances that impact blood pH. So this is all things that you want to get out of your blood, things that you don't want circulating throughout your system anymore. All right. Okay, let's start to wrap things up here. I want to go back up to this gross anatomy. These ureters, I want to make sure you all understand, is made of smooth muscle. You cannot control them. And the smooth muscle helps to allow blood to flow out of the kidneys and towards the bladder. The urinary bladder itself is also made of smooth muscle and helps to pass urine out the body. Now, we all know that when you have to go pee, you have to go urinate, that sometimes your teacher, your parents, or someone will say, I need you to hold it. You've got to hold it. You do have an external sphincter, and this external sphincter is made of skeletal muscle. And as you all should know, it is voluntarily controlled. So when you are told to hold it, you need to hold your pee. I know it can be uncomfortable. It can possibly be even painful. You do the pee dance, we've all seen that, but you can hold it in. You can try to hold it in for as long as you can, but eventually, the dam breaks. But this external sphincter helps you to hold in your urine, and that is made of skeletal muscle, and so it is voluntarily controlled. So when I say hold your pee, you can't go to the bathroom until after 10 minutes, you should be able to hold it. Some people can't, and that's called incontinence, where they can't control the flow of urine out of their urinary system. You typically see that with older people, and that's where I actually have to wear diapers. They have to wear preventative measures so they don't always have wet pants. All right. Okay, couple disorders I want to discuss with you guys, and then we will finish off. Oh, one more thing. Forgot to say this. Emptying the bladder. This is on your mastering. Emptying the bladder, aka going to the bathroom and peeing, is known as voiding. You void your bladder. I remember that I put that on your mastering. I want to make sure you guys get that. You void it. Void means no more. It's gone. It's empty. So when you void your bladder, you are emptying it. So next time you go to the bathroom, say, Mr. Thorson, can I go void my bladder? I know it sounds really weird. No one ever says that, but if you want to be really nerdy and anatomical, that's what that means. Okay. Let me go over just a couple diseases or disorders, and that will be it. So just give me 1 second. Let me get my notes up. Okay. Let's see here. We have a urinary tract infection, a UTI. Urinary tract infections are bacterial infections, and it can be treated with antibiotics. Here's some of the symptoms of urinary tract infections. And I'm sorry to say this, but some of you may have already had a UTI, and you are likely to get a UTI. A decent percentage of you sometime in your life, especially the girls. So, symptoms: a strong, persistent urge to urinate, a burning sensation, when urinating, passing frequent small amounts of urine, producing urine that appears cloudy, you could possibly have blood in the urine. That's happened. Your blood can appear pink or bright red. That's a sign of blood in there. Strong smelling urine, because there's bacteria in there. Bacteria doesn't smell good. And in women, pelvic pain, now, the reason why women tend to get it more is because women have a shorter urethra. Male's urethra goes through the penis, and the urethra is longer. And so in women, the urethra is so much shorter that the bacteria don't have to travel very far to go from the external opening of the urethra to the bladder. It's very short. Males, it does take longer. And so oftentimes, not every time, males get UTIs too, but the bacteria just has to go further, and it can be more of a challenge. For women, it's easier. So, risk factors. What could cause someone to get a UTI? One is just the general female anatomy, as I just mentioned. Women have shorter urethras. This shortens the distance to the bladder. Next is sexual activity. Sexually active women that tend to have more UTIs than the women who are not sexually active. And having a new sex partner can also increase your risk. Sexually active women are more susceptible than women who aren't sexually active. And also, women that have different sex partners are at a greater risk. We all have bacteria. And quite honestly, sometimes people have sex with other people and you don't know where they've been. You don't know what they have. And it's just, you have an immune system, but you got to wait for your immune system to attack it. Some types of birth control. Women who use the diaphragms for birth control may be at a higher risk, as well as women who use spermicidal agents. And then finally, menopause, which no one your age will have to deal with. Menopause is when you have no more egg cells, you've ovulated your last egg cell, and now it's basically physiologically impossible for you to get pregnant. After menopause, there's a decline in estrogen that causes changes in the urinary tract that can make you more vulnerable to infection. So these are some of the general risk factors. The treatment is just basically antibiotics and time. That's really the only thing that you can do. And I'll let you guys catch up. And there's one more little disorder I want to share with you, and that'll be it. And that is kidney stones. Kidney stones are literal concentrations of solutes that have formed a solid. And they can actually get trapped in a urethra. They can get trapped in the bladder. They can get trapped in a ureter. So I'm going to go back up here for a second. And let's look at this kidney here. Let's see. One of the jobs of your kidneys is to filter out ions. Some ions can be like calcium, sodium, chloride, and these ions can build up and they can actually form little stones like this. And these stones can actually get trapped in the ureter. And these stones can be of all different shapes. It can be a rounded stone, they can be jagged, it can be painful. And if the stone is small enough, it can go into the bladder and they can end up in the urethra. The problem is that some of these stones can be so jagged and uneasy to pass that it can really tear up your ureters, it can tear up your urethra. And passing them, I've never had one, but I've heard that they are just painful. And once you've had a kidney stone once, there's a 75% chance that you'll have another one, which is no good. One of the ways that you can actually break down a kidney stone is sound waves. A doctor can actually have a device that will focus sound waves on your abdomen, and it will try to break down the kidney stone into smaller pieces so it's easier to pass. On the other hand, if that doesn't work, surgery might be it might have to be your only option because it is stuck. Fluid can't go by and it's just tearing up your ureters or your urethra. It's painful. You're peeing blood. I've just heard horrible things about them. In the 12 years I've taught school, I've had 2 students who have had kidney stones. They're both senior girls, and they said that they ate a lot of salt. And the problem with consuming a lot of salt and calcium is if you don't have enough water flushing out your system, a lot of these solutes can build up and build up. So you always want to be flushing your system out to try to keep the buildup of these ions in your kidneys so you don't have to worry about kidney stones. But they can be really painful. I've heard nothing but bad things. So make sure you do what you can to avoid having them. All right, guys, that is it for the entire urinary system. As I told you, that's all you really have to know at the high school level. If you go to college, you'll learn a lot more. And that's all.